The current surged through buried cables, stretching out in each direction.
Of course, it might seem obvious to us now, but in New York back in the early 1880s, the idea of burying electric cables underground seemed like an unnecessary expense. This street would have been crisscrossed with hundreds of cables used for telegraphs, telephones, and arc street lighting. Looking up, you'd have seen a tangled mass of black spaghetti blocking out the light.
Edison knew this dangerous situation had to change, and for him to make as much money as he could, electricity needed rebranding. It had to be considered safe.
So Edison is arguing both for the greater safety of his DC low voltage system and for underground lines. He can argue that he has a much safer system than electric arc light for streets or gas lighting for indoor lighting, right? He doesn't have to worry about fires, doesn't have to worry about electrocution, that all of this is much safer because of the system he's created with this underground system.
Burying every cable was not only very expensive, but was a logistical nightmare, because this was one of the busiest square miles in the world.
Edison chose this area for a reason. Wall Street. Rich, important, influential. Because for Edison's system to make money, all these wealthy customers had to be within a mile of his power station.
And this was because Edison calculated the thickest cable he could afford would only carry an adequate amount of his continuous direct current to customers within this range. This was a huge leap forward, because for the first time, dozens of customers could be supplied by just one power station. But there was a big problem. Edison's network could never be economical in lighting America's new suburbs. They just didn't have the concentration of customers needed to make building these expensive power stations worthwhile. Had we stuck with Edison's way of generating and distributing electricity, the world would be a very different place.
We'd have to have power stations scattered around no more than a mile apart, even in the centres of our towns and cities. And it would be extraordinarily expensive to even provide power for smaller communities. But someone who held the answers to these problems was about to enter the story. Someone who would help create the modern world and who'd play an integral part in one of the biggest fallouts in scientific history. His name was Nikola Tesla, and he was right under Edison's nose.
Nikola Tesla was a Serbian inventor who was born in Croatia and who worked for Edison briefly after arriving in New York at the age of 28. European, introverted, a deep thinker. He was everything Edison wasn't.
Edison and Tesla could not be more different in the way that they handled their self-appearance and their manners, and the way that they constructed a public image for themselves. Edison could care less about the clothes that he had on, and if he spilled chemicals on his good Sunday suit, then he spilled chemicals on his good Sunday suit. He was, basically a very, very kind of slovenly guy. Tesla, on the other hand, even as a young man in his mid-20s, is thinking about his appearance, how he comes across to people, so he cares about his clothes, he cares about his manner, indeed he even cares about how his portraits are taken, and he always wants to make sure that he has a nice three-quarter profile, so you don't see the fact that he has a bit of a pointy chin.
The life and death of Nikola Tesla is one of the most fascinating yet tragic stories of scientific brilliance, cutthroat business, and shocking public relations stunts.
The American public may have been wowed by Edison's new direct current power stations, but Tesla was less impressed. He had a dream electricity could be transmitted across entire cities, or even nations. And he believed he knew how it could be done, by using a different type of electric current. Electrical experts knew that the smaller the current sent down a cable, the smaller the losses in it through resistance, and so the longer the cable could be. Tesla proposed using a method of transmitting electricity where the currents could be lowered without a fall in the amount of electrical power at the other end. It was called alternating current.
Alternating current is exactly that. It's an electric current that alternates between moving in one direction, then the opposite direction very quickly, as opposed to a direct current which moves only in one direction.
Tesla was interested in alternating current because, like other electrical engineers in the late 1880s, he realized that as you raise the voltage of any current that you transmit from point A to point B, it's going to be more efficient to have a higher voltage.
And since the amount of electric power in a cable is its voltage multiplied by its current, increasing the voltage meant the current in the cables could be reduced, and so losses due to resistance would be less.
However, you don't want very high voltages on the order of, say, 20,000 volts coming into your home. So you need to step down the current that is being transmitted over a distance into your home, and to do that you need a converter or a transformer. Alternating current allows you to use a transformer to make that switch from the high transmission voltage to the lower voltage that you're going to use at consumption.
Perfecting the technology to transmit electricity hundreds of miles from where it was generated would mark a huge step towards the modern world. And a wealthy industrial entrepreneur was already developing the solution. His name was George Westinghouse. Westinghouse believed alternating current was the future, but it had a big drawback. While it was fine for electric light, unlike direct current, there was no practical motor that could run on it, and no one believed there ever would be, apart from Nikola Tesla.
Tesla, as an inventor, liked to say that the first thing you need to do is not to build something, but to imagine it, to think it through, to plan it. And he had what modern-day psychologists would call an eidetic memory. He could basically remember everything that he saw and then visualize it in 3 dimensions. And they often say that the people that have this skill see it about an arm's length away out here, and they see it in 3 dimensions in that space. And all of the indications are is Tesla had that ability.
This is a Tesla egg. It's a replica of the one Tesla used to demonstrate his greatest breakthrough, and one of the most important